The crash and the cry. The cockpit lights glowed faintly against the endless dark of space, a steady rhythm of blinking greens and pulsing reds. Commander Elias Rourke sat in the pilot's chair of the Wayfarer, hands firm on the controls, his jaw set in the expression of a man who had been through storms before. But today wasn't about missions or military precision. Today, it was about his daughter. 9-year-old Lila sat behind him, feet swinging from the jump seat, eyes wide as she peered through the viewport. Her hair, a tangle of brown curls, caught the light whenever she leaned forward. She had begged to come along on this supply run, and after months of saying no, Elias had relented. He told himself it would be safe, just a short hop between colonies. In truth, he wanted her close. Out here, he could give her his attention without the distractions of Earth. "Daddy," she said softly, pressing her nose against the glass. "The stars look like they're singing." Elias allowed himself the faintest smile. "Stars don't sing, Peanut, but I'll admit they put on a good show." The shuttle shuddered suddenly. Warning lights flared. The smile vanished from Elias's face as he leaned forward. "Hold on." His fingers danced across the console. A meteor alarm wailed, shrill and urgent. Outside, fragments of rock streaked by like molten arrows. The shields flared blue with each impact. "Daddy." Lila's voice quivered. "Stay strapped in." His tone was calm, clipped. He had been through worse, but the Wayfarer was a transport shuttle, not a warship. One sharp hit could cripple them. A deafening crack rattled the hull. The ship lurched sideways, alarms screaming louder. Elias fought the controls, his breath steady despite the chaos. He guided the shuttle toward a nearby planet, the only option in range. "Hold tight, Lila. We're going down." The descent was brutal. The ship screamed through atmosphere, hull plates glowing red as if trying to peel away. Clouds tore past, and the ground rushed closer. An endless stretch of white tundra, jagged mountains jutting like teeth. Impact. The world went black. Elias woke to the hiss of static and the sting of cold air. His head pounded, but he forced himself upright. The cockpit was wrecked, panels sparking, glass fractured. Snow swirled through a breach in the hull. "Lila, I'm here, Daddy." Her small voice cut through the storm. Relief surged through him as he turned to see her crawling out of her harness. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes wide but alive. He scooped her up, pressing his forehead against hers for one heartbeat before shifting back into survival mode. The shuttle was dead. Power gone, comms fried. They were stranded. Elias grabbed an emergency pack, shoving rations and heat packs inside. He needed to set up shelter fast. The cold here was brutal, seeping into his bones. But before he could move them from the wreck, Lila froze. "Daddy." Her head tilted, eyes narrowing. Over the howl of the wind, Elias heard it too, a faint sound, high-pitched, almost like crying. He frowned. "It's just the wind." "No," she insisted, tugging his sleeve. "That's a baby." "Lila, we stay close to the ship. That's the rule." But she was already stepping toward the snow beyond the wreck, small boots crunching. Elias muttered a curse under his breath and followed. The sound grew clearer as they descended a rocky ravine. It was a whimper, weak and trembling. Then they saw it. A massive shape lay half buried in snow. A dragon, scales dulled and wings torn, breath ragged and shallow. Even injured, the creature radiated power. Beside her, curled against her flank, was something smaller. A hatchling, barely larger than a husky pup. Its scales shimmered faintly with frost. Its tiny chest heaved in shallow, uneven breaths. The mother dragon's eye cracked open, glowing amber. She bared her teeth weakly at Elias, a growl rumbling from deep in her chest. Elias instinctively raised his arm to shield Lila. "Stay back." But Lila slipped past him, her coat already coming off her shoulders. "Daddy, her baby is cold," she cried, kneeling beside the shivering hatchling. She wrapped her coat around it with clumsy determination, her small hands rubbing its icy scales. The hatchling let out a weak chirp, burrowing closer to her warmth. The mother dragon's growl faltered, her gaze fixed on Lila, not with hostility, but with something else, something weary, almost pleading. Elias stood frozen in the snow, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They were stranded, freezing, and low on supplies. Helping a dragon, of all things, was madness. And yet, looking at his daughter, shielding a creature that wasn't hers, he felt the decision being made for him. He lowered his weapon, kneeling beside her. "All right," he said quietly, eyes locked on the wounded mother dragon. "We'll help them, but this won't be easy." Lila looked up at him, cheeks flushed, eyes fierce with certainty. "It doesn't have to be easy, Daddy. It just has to be right." And in that frozen ravine, surrounded by snow and silence, Elias Rourke realized their survival would be tied not only to their own strength, but to the fragile life of a dragon's child. Fragile fires. Snow lashed against the ravine walls, filling the air with white haze. Elias crouched near the injured dragon, his breath forming clouds as he checked the medkit. He'd seen battlefield wounds before, soldiers torn apart by shrapnel, plasma burns across armor. The dragon's injuries weren't so different. Torn muscle, bleeding gashes, cracked ribs. Only the scale and strangeness made it alien. He pressed a thermal patch against the dragon's side. The adhesive clung poorly to the scales, but the material activated, glowing orange as it seeped warmth and clotting agents into her wound. The dragon twitched, teeth bared, but she didn't strike. "Daddy," she scared. Elias looked over. Lila was crouched beside the hatchling, her coat wrapped snugly around it. The little creature whimpered softly, curled into her lap like a frozen ember. Its eyes, pale gold with flecks of blue, fluttered weakly before closing again. "She's not the only one," Elias muttered, scanning the snow for movement. "We need shelter." The wayfarer was too far and too exposed. He spotted a hollow in the cliff wall where wind had carved out a shallow cave. With effort, he hauled the emergency heater from his pack, planting it in the hollow. The unit hummed faintly, casting out a weak glow. "Bring them," he said. Lila grunted as she lifted the hatchling, cradling it carefully. Elias' wrist stepping close to the mother dragon, gesturing with open palms. "Easy. We're moving you to cover." The dragon's eye tracked him, glowing faintly through the snow. Then, slowly, she shifted. It was agony to watch, her body dragging across the ice, blood streaking behind. Elias shouldered her weight with a grunt, guiding her toward the cave. Inside, the heater spread a thin warmth. Elias unrolled thermal blankets, laying one beneath the hatchling and another over Lila's shoulders. His daughter ignored her own shivering, tucking the tiny dragon into the cocoon with gentle determination. "Ember," she whispered, stroking the hatchling's icy scales. "What?" Elias asked. "That's her name, Ember." Lila looked at him with the same certainty she always had when naming stray animals back home. "Because she just needs a little fire." Elias rubbed a hand over his face. Naming it made this more than survival. It made it family. Hours passed. Elias worked in silence, patching wounds, checking rations, conserving heat cells. He counted supplies like a miser. Oxygen tanks, 3. Food bars, 6 days maybe. Water, meltable ice, plentiful. Ammo, 2 magazines. Every calculation screamed the same truth. Helping these dragons meant risking their own survival. "Lila," he said finally, sitting across from her, "we can't save everyone." Her chin lifted. "But we're not everyone. We're human." He blinked at the words. They were too sharp, too wise for a 9-year-old. He wanted to argue, to tell her compassion didn't keep you alive out here. But then he saw Ember nestled against her chest, tiny chest rising steadier than before, and he thought of his late wife's voice. "Kindness makes us different, Elias. Don't ever forget that." His throat tightened. He said nothing more. The storm outside howled like a living thing. At first Elias thought the sound was just wind. Then he heard the crunch of boots. His blood went cold. He motioned for silence, grabbing his sidearm. Lila hugged Ember closer, eyes wide. Figures emerged from the white blur. 3 tall shapes, armored in crude plates, weapons slung across their shoulders. Mercenaries. Hunters. Their helmets glowed with scanners, sweeping the ravine. Tracks. One barked in a guttural alien tongue. The dragon is near. Elias pressed his back against the cave wall, mind racing. If they found the mother and hatchling, it was over. The hunters moved closer, their rifles glinting in the storm's half-light. One pointed toward the cave. Here, Elias didn't hesitate. He flicked his wrist, activating a flare. It hissed to life, rolling across the snow, blindingly bright. The hunters cursed, shielding their visors. In that heartbeat of distraction, Elias fired. 2 precise shots cracked through the air, dropping the lead alien into the snow. The others roared, returning fire. Plasma bolts sizzled, scorching the rock. Lila screamed, but held Ember tight. Elias fired again, using the flare's light to mask his movements. A second hunter crumpled. The third snarled, charging into the cave. The mother dragon stirred. With a guttural growl, she lashed her tail, striking the intruder hard enough to shatter bone. The mercenary crumpled against the rock wall, helmet cracking. Silence fell, broken only by Lila's ragged breathing. Elias lowered his weapon, chest heaving. He glanced at the mother dragon. Her head sagged back to the ground, eyes dim. Yet in his mind, clear as a whisper, came a voice not his own. "Human, protect my child." The telepathic plea faded like smoke, leaving Elias trembling. He stared at Lila, who rocked Ember gently in her arms, unaware of what he'd heard. For the first time since the crash, Elias understood. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a promise. Fire in the snow. The storm didn't end. It pressed on through the night and into the next day, a white curtain that swallowed the sky and blurred the horizon. Elias stood at the mouth of the cave, coat pulled tight, eyes scanning the frozen wasteland. Snow crusted over his beard, his hands stiff inside his gloves. Somewhere beyond the storm, more hunters could be gathering. Behind him, the cave flickered with weak light from the heater. The mother dragon lay curled against the rock, chest rising shallowly, still bleeding despite the patches. She would not last long. Beside her, nestled against Lila, the hatchling stirred fitfully. Ember was stronger now, but still fragile. Elias turned back inside, stamping the snow from his boots. He carried a strip of meat torn from a snow beast he had managed to hunt with a makeshift spear. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Food," he said, crouching beside his daughter. Lila's eyes lit up. She tore off a small piece and held it to Ember's mouth. The hatchling sniffed, uncertain, before nibbling clumsily. Its tiny teeth scraped her glove. "That's it, Ember," she whispered. "Just a little more." Elias watched her, exhaustion settling in his bones. He had spent hours setting snares, melting ice for water, scavenging broken circuits from the wreck. Every move was a calculation, every resource stretched thin. Still, his daughter's voice filled the cave with warmth. "You're doing good," he said quietly. Lila smiled faintly. "She's getting stronger." She brushed Ember's head. "I think she's trying to talk to me, Daddy. Not with words, just feelings." Elias frowned. "Careful, Lila. Dragons aren't pets. They're dangerous." "Maybe to others," she said, chin lifted. "Not to us." Her certainty reminded him so much of her mother it hurt. Elias sat back, sighing. "You sound just like her." That evening, while the storm howled, Ember made her first attempt. A hiccup, a cough, and then a spark. Tiny but real. A flicker of orange glowed from her mouth before fading into smoke. Lila clapped her hands in delight. "Did you see that? She's learning." The hatchling sneezed, sparks scattering against the cave wall. The mother dragon stirred weakly, eyes soft with pride. Elias felt something shift inside him. Against all logic, against the math of rations and survival, they were keeping this creature alive. A human child and her stubborn father, in a frozen wasteland, had sparked life back into a dying ember. But danger was never far. The next morning, faint trails in the snow caught Elias's eye, boot prints. He knelt, tracing them with a gloved hand. More hunters, and more disciplined than the last group. They had regrouped, and they were searching. Back in the cave, Elias worked quickly. He stripped wiring from a broken panel, rigging it into a crude tripwire connected to a flare cell. He stacked rocks near the entrance, set snares where the snow narrowed. Every move was deliberate. He had defended outposts with less. "Daddy," Lila asked softly as she stroked Ember's scales, "what if they find us?" "Then we don't let them take her," Elias said flatly. Her eyes widened, but she nodded. She didn't ask how. She trusted him. That night, the storm broke. Stars glittered sharp in the clear sky. Elias lay awake, hand on his sidearm, listening to the crackle of the heater. His daughter slept curled around Ember, both of them breathing softly. The mother dragon shifted, tail twitching, eyes faintly glowing. Then Elias heard it. Voices, low, muffled, carried on the night air. He slipped outside, crouching low against the snow. Figures moved in the distance, 5 this time, better armed, scanning with long-range sensors. They were careful, patient. Elias's gut tightened. He had bought them hours, maybe a day. But when these hunters closed in, there would be no hiding. He returned to the cave, crouching beside his daughter. He brushed her shoulder gently. "Lila, wake up." Her eyes opened, heavy with sleep. "What is it?" "They're coming," he said. Ember stirred, letting out a faint trill as though sensing the danger too. Elias looked at the hatchling, then at his daughter. He knew what had to happen. He couldn't win this fight alone, not against 5 armed mercenaries in open ground. The only chance they had was to trust what was growing inside that fragile creature. He whispered, more to himself than to her, "We're going to need fire, humanity's gift." The night was brittle with silence, broken only by the crunch of boots in the snow. 5 hunters crept across the frozen plain, weapons raised, visors glowing faintly blue. Their shadows stretched long in the moonlight as they approached the ravine. From the cave mouth, Elias watched them come. His hands were steady on the rifle, though his heart thudded heavy in his chest. He had counted their steps, mapped their angles, set every trap he could with scraps and wire. But the math was grim. 5 armed mercenaries against 1 man, a child, and 2 half-dead dragons. The odds weren't survival. The odds were sacrifice. He looked back into the cave. Lila knelt beside Ember, whispering soft encouragement. The hatchling trembled, smoke curling from its tiny nostrils. It was afraid, but its eyes, bright gold now, locked onto hers as if drawing strength from her calm. "You can do this," she murmured. "You're not alone." The mother dragon stirred, lifting her massive head despite her wounds. Her gaze found Elias, and once again he heard it, her voice in his mind. "Protect her. Guide her flame." Elias nodded grimly. "All right then, let's show them what humans do best." The first hunter tripped the wire. The flare's cell ignited, bursting into blinding white light. Elias opened fire, his shots sharp and precise. 1 mercenary dropped, armor sizzling where the rounds pierced weak joints. The others roared, scattering for cover. Plasma bolts ripped through the air, scorching the cave mouth. Rocks shattered, spraying fragments. Elias ducked, firing back in controlled bursts. His traps triggered in sequence. Rocks tumbling from ledges, spears snapping up from hidden snares. 2 hunters fell, but the others pressed forward, relentless. Inside, Lila shielded Ember with her body. "It's okay," she whispered, even as fear shook her voice. "You're stronger than you think. Just breathe." The hatchling coughed, sparks spilling from its mouth. "Not enough. Not yet." A mercenary stormed the cave, rifle raised. Elias whirled, too slow. A plasma shot screamed toward them. The mother dragon lunged. With a final surge of strength, she threw herself between the blast and the humans. The bolt seared in her chest. She staggered, but did not fall, wings spreading wide to block the cave. Her roar shook the walls, a sound of fury and defiance. "Daddy!" Lila cried. Elias fired, dropping the intruder. But his eyes were on the mother dragon, whose massive body now trembled with the effort of standing. Blood streaked down her scales. She turned her head, pressing her snout close to Ember and Lila. Live, her voice whispered, "Burn bright." Then she collapsed, her great form going still. Lila sobbed, clinging tighter to Ember. The hatchling wailed, a sharp, keening cry that cut through the storm. Its small body shook, scales flaring with sudden heat. Elias felt the shift in the air, the way the cold retreated for one heartbeat. "Now, Ember," Lila whispered fiercely. "Now," the hatchling roared. It was a child's roar, high and raw, but fire burst from its mouth, a torrent of orange and gold, wild and alive. The flames struck the fuel cells Elias had rigged near the entrance. The world erupted. Fire roared outward, engulfing the remaining hunters. The explosion lit the night sky like a second sun. Snow melted into steam, ice shattered, and the mercenaries were thrown into the darkness, their screams swallowed by the blaze. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of flames. Elias staggered to his feet, chest heaving. The cave was scorched but standing. Lila crouched beside Ember, tears streaking her cheeks, but she was smiling. The hatchling trembled, smoke curling from its jaws, eyes glowing with fierce pride. "You did it," she whispered, hugging it close. "You saved us." Elias knelt beside her, wrapping them both in his arms. He pressed his forehead against hers, whispering hoarsely, "You were right, Peanut. Sometimes being human means keeping the fire alive." Above them, the stars glittered clear and sharp, as though the universe itself had paused to bear witness. 2 days later, a rescue beacon finally reached them. A colonial dropship descended through the snow, its crew stunned by the sight. A battered human pilot, his daughter, and a dragon hatchling curled safely between them. "Is that a dragon?" one of the rescuers asked, disbelief in his voice. Elias met his gaze steadily. "Her name's Ember, and she's with us." Word spread quickly across the sector. A tale of a human man and his child, stranded on a frozen world, who not only survived but defended a dragon's child against mercenaries. To some, it was madness. To others, a miracle. But everywhere, it was proof of one thing whispered with awe. Humans are dangerous, not because they kill, but because they save. On the dropship, as engines rumbled and stars stretched once more across the viewport, Lila dozed against her father's side. Ember nestled close, warm, and safe. Elias looked out into the endless dark, his arm wrapped around them both. For the first time in years, he felt something he had thought long buried: hope.